Hi there, and welcome to Enterprise AI Defenders, a show that highlights how enterprise security leaders are using innovative technologies to stop the most sophisticated cyber attacks. In each episode, Fortune 500 CISOs share how AI has changed the threat landscape, real-world examples of modern attacks, and the role AI will play in the future of cybersecurity. I'm Evan Reiser, the founder and CEO of Abnormal AI.
And I'm Mike Britton, the CIO of Abnormal AI. Today on the show, we're bringing you a conversation with Lester Godsey, Chief Information Security Officer at Arizona State University. ASU is one of the largest public universities in the U.S., with over 200,000 students and a rapidly evolving AI research and innovation ecosystem. There were three interesting things that stood out to me in the conversation with Lester. First, Lester's team built an in-house platform that supports over 60 large language models, all with built-in privacy, security, and ethical controls. It's a walled garden approach that lets students and researchers experiment safely while protecting institutional trust. Second, the threat landscape in higher education is evolving fast. To defend against phishing campaigns and prompt injection attacks, Lester's team is combining cyber, physical, and human risk management into one unified governance approach. And finally, Lester sees AI as a democratizing force in cybersecurity. His team is piloting an AI model that ingests and normalizes threat intelligence data, allowing smaller institutions to access high-quality insights without expensive vendor costs.
Lester, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Mike and I were looking forward to the conversation. Maybe to start, do you mind giving kind of our audience a little bit of background about yourself and maybe kind of an overview about your role at ASU today?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lester Godsey, I've been in my role for about 10 months now as the CISO for Arizona State University. And by way of context, ASU is the largest public university by student enrollment. So last number I heard earlier this week was right around 200,000 students. So, but me personally, I've been in primarily public sector IT support. So a combination of higher education and local government for the last 30 plus years. And so prior to ASU, I was a CISO at Maricopa County. And so a lot of people know me based off of that, based off of my experience and work with dealing with the 2020 and 2024 presidential elections, if you will. So that was very formative. We'll use the word formative. And so just a lot of public sector experience.
Do you mind sharing a little bit about like what inspires you, right? What motivates you? Why sign up for that hard work, right? You must have, there's some driving force there. I'd love to maybe share that with our audience.
So I have roots in higher education. I've also taught on and off again for the better part of 15 years at collegiate level. But a lot of it actually has to do with the charter of ASU. And so President Crow, who's been in the role for over 20 years here at ASU, our focus at ASU is we're defined by who we include and who we serve as a community, right? And we're of the opinion that higher education has a role to play in society. And that culture itself really is what motivates me to be in this role. And as you said, Evan, it is very challenging. So like just from a compliance perspective, we have criminal justice information. We have FERPA, which is student-related data. We have an international presence at ASU, so we deal with GDPR and other compliance standards and GLBA. Take your pick, HIPAA. All the acronyms more or less apply to us, right, when it comes to compliance. So it is a very complicated, large, and heavy responsibility, but the mission outweighs all that, in my opinion. And so being part of an organization who is focused on having a societal impact, that's huge.
Do you mind sharing a little bit kind of what's at stake when you think about cybersecurity, right? It's not just, making the network secure, making people look at phishing emails, right? There's a bigger impact I think you and your team have on, the greater community and maybe even the world by helping protect your students, your faculty, your alumni. Yeah, can you share a little bit like why is cybersecurity so important for you and the team?
I think what cybersecurity folks across the board, whether you're in higher ed or a different industry, are saying is the bad guys, there's less of this delineation between, this is a cyber risk versus physical risk. It's all one and the same. And so really, cybersecurity professionals, not that our jobs weren't already hard enough to begin with, But now we have to contend and we have to be more open with respect to being able to filter, identify multiple disparate types of risk, and ensure that the right folks within our organization get that information to act in an intelligent and timely manner. So whether it's student safety or intellectual property, ASU being a Research One institution, obviously we're very concerned about data security, but then everything in between, including the well-being and the status of our faculty, staff, and students, right? Everything's fair game from a cyber perspective these days.
You talk about these roles, and you mentioned research, and I'm imagining ASU is absolutely a hotbed of experimentation and research when it comes to AI and AI tools. And I imagine your students are using it both for good and bad. How is ASU approaching the governance and safe adoption of generative AI while still encouraging innovation?
We're arguably leading the way when it comes to AI adoption. And so that includes both the adoption of third-party tools. So for example, we just announced yesterday was the first day where we have an agreement with OpenAI to give access to all faculty, staff, and students, the ChatGPT for EDU, I believe. And so that's one example. But then internally, ASU's developed its own platform, and we've developed it in-house. We currently support, I think the last number I saw was over 60 large language models, both private and commercial, all trained in-house. We've developed this walled garden platform internally within the organization, and we've developed our own privacy, security, and ethical security, our controls, if you will, for that internal platform. And then to your specific question, Mike, we are in process of standing up our governance structure. And so actually by the time this airs, I believe we'll have that already in place. We have an actionable framework that's been developed that we're adhering to. And then from a governance perspective, we have that in place as well. And on top of that, we're doing things where we are taking a playbook from our security program, and we're doing an actual tabletop exercise later this semester, specifically around ensuring that from an operational perspective, we know how to address things that come up as a result of use of AI as it relates to security and privacy. So in a lot of ways, I would say, Mike, that the adoption of AI, as big and as pivotal and influential as it is, it's no different than the adoption of any other technology in that. So from an overall security perspective, you still have the basics that you do from a programmatic perspective. So whether it was adoption of cloud technologies or virtualization or anything else with that. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the internet was becoming a thing. So, and so we just take those steps and we do our due diligence along those lines.
I'd love to hear what you're seeing from how bad guys are leveraging AI and how bad guys are attacking students as victims. But then sometimes, unfortunately, you may have students that are actually doing things they shouldn't be doing as well from a negative perspective as well. So how do you and your team, I guess first, how do you and your team see the threat landscape with attackers attacking students? And then also, how do you kind of balance that differing approach between protecting students versus protecting faculty and other internal resources?
I will say this, from my perspective, our biggest concern is that of prompt injection in particular. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is the vast majority of the use of AI has been improving the efficiency and the speed in which attacks are deployed against organizations. So it's not, for the most part, I'm not seeing novel, net new type of attacks per se, but rather AI being leveraged to be more efficient and effective along those lines. And so an example that comes to mind actually was from my last job. And so in 2020, we saw a bunch of deepfakes, for example, but the quality and caliber of those deepfakes were such that it wasn't believable. And, you could kind of laugh it off. In 2024, nobody was laughing, right? And so the things we saw employed against us at Maricopa County were significantly better. A lot of that had to do with the AI as well as phishing, et cetera, et cetera. The prompt injection is definitely something that is net new, that's unique to the use of AI, in particular generative in this instance. And I kind of liken it to the new flavor SQL injection, right? And so so those are the kind of things that we're seeing. But then to the last part of your question, very interesting in that insider threats always been, whether it's, and for listeners, all insider threats not malicious, right? It could be accidental, it could be intentional, but insider threat is definitely something we're looking at. And part of our concern too is I've seen lots of stories. I'd love to hear your guys' perspective on people are using AI in lieu of counseling or as somebody or something to connect with, right? And so so a lot of our concerns are not just the traditional cybersecurity, but what about mental health? What about well-being? What about physical safety, et cetera, et cetera? So those are some of the newer kind of more unique kind of concerns that we have as a result of AI.
How do you kind of manage, this ever-connected world when it comes to attackers and obviously Arizona State is probably, for a variety of reasons, it's on some attackers' list of wanting to attack you. How do you deal with the complexity of such an interconnected world and everything driven by SaaS, and this system is connected to another, and how do you kind of untangle that complexity?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And so really, a couple of things to come to mind. One, a lot of the problems and a lot of the risks associated with AI are no different than the other kind of risks that we have. And so what I mean by that is, you guys know firsthand this, but a lot of the cyber challenges and risks that AI kind of highlights have been challenges that have existed for decades. Well, let's just be honest. So probably the obvious one is treating data as an asset and data classification, right? And so so in a lot of instances, the way we try tackling that is the fundamentals. And so so for example, we have a vendor IT risk assessment process as we onboard, to your point about SaaS, third party, fourth party. We have a checklist associated with any new technology that we onboard. And so that checklist also reflects the use of AI along those lines. And so that's one of our first forays and one of our first security controls that we have in place. And so it has nothing to do with technology. It's just ensuring that our existing business process accounts for the use of AI. And so then it trickles down from there all the way to intended use case and when is it appropriate and advisable to use our internally developed walled garden Create AI platform versus the use of third-party SaaS products such as ChatGPT or Gemini, et cetera, et cetera. Underneath all that is, again, it fundamentally boils down to risk again. So being able to articulate what our position is on if you have sensitive or highly sensitive data per our classification standard, that you can't use third-party instance, AI solutions or products and upload that information. And so and again, that's just foundational. That existed before, this accelerated adoption of AI. And so it's just, in a lot of instances, it's just sticking to your guns, doing the basics and trying to do those well. Where it makes sense, apply the same logic and the same compensating or mitigating controls to AI. And in those rare instances like prompt injection or, model poisoning or drift, et cetera, then you have to come up with net new processes. This is where the earlier conversation around governance comes into play, and having that intelligent conversation so that way the organization as a whole understands what those risks are and everybody's involved and part of the solution. And how do we tackle that?
What do you think the role of AI is going to be in the future of kind of cyber defense? Are there examples where you and your team have seen success implementing AI solutions? Are there some areas you feel like are a little bit maybe overhyped that may not add value? Are there areas that you're very excited about? I'd love to hear how you think about where AI can play a role in cyber defense.
I do think AI has the ability to democratize cybersecurity in particular. And so one of the things I'll throw out there is threat intelligence, for example. So currently right now, unless there's an open source or a free solution out there, so like one of the ISACs, although the ISAC community is facing a challenge these days. I'm not going to get into it, but for all intents and purposes, unless you can go with a highly curated, usually 6 or 7 figure dollar amount for threat intelligence with one of the major players out in the industry, you're not going to get real time, highly curated and high fidelity threat intelligence, right? I think AI has the potential of changing that landscape. And so, because the biggest risk from a societal perspective is small, medium business, right? So the interesting thing is all the technology exists today to automate a lot of security operations. In my opinion, one of the things that's stopping that from occurring is trust in the information that they're getting to automate against. So like, I can't begin to tell you, I'm sure you guys have seen this yourself. I've received IOCs for things. If I had followed an automated like auto blacklisting on my firewall, this IP address, I would have blocked Google's DNS IP address, right? I mean, I'd be looking for a new job. And so a lot of that is threat intelligence. And so I think AI has the ability, and we have a small internal project that is looking at training a specific model to ingest multiple disparate sources of threat intelligence, various different IOCs in different formats. And we're not just looking at good threat intelligence, we're purposely looking for bad as well, and trying to create a model that can consolidate all this information from disparate sources in different formats with disparate levels of fidelity into in a way that we could then machine ingest, but then identify with a high degree of fidelity that the threat intelligence is good. So that way small and medium businesses could actually take action against that.
Should we even look at the paradigm of is threat intelligence kind of by itself dead in the world of AI? Because now I really could look at behavior and anomaly and understand and baseline what normal behavior might look like for you. And when I see anomalistic behavior, really be able to take action based on behavior versus an IOC that may or may not be accurate. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Mike. Although the pessimist in me, I immediately, the first thought that crossed my mind when you said that was, what's the source of intelligence, or the data itself, and how accurate is it, right? But making the assumption that whatever you're ingesting is accurate and is reflective of what reality is, I definitely think there's something to be said for that. AI is finally our opportunity to actually identify behavior. And to a certain degree, one of the big challenges in cybersecurity is a lot of organizations spend a lot of time trying to determine intent, right? Which from an traditional IOC perspective is virtually impossible, right? Because you're looking at hashes, you're looking at IP addresses, you're looking at, et cetera, et cetera. More nuanced practitioners might be able to infer intent based off of things like timestamps, et cetera, frequency. There's some statistical elements that come into play. But AI, to your point, I think gives us the closest that we can get to other than traditional espionage type of approach, right? It's the closest thing that us normal folks have to maybe inferring intent. And why do we care about intent from a cybersecurity perspective? Because, I would treat a potential threat very differently if it was a spray and pray attack versus that of a targeted specific, onslaught against my organization. And so intent makes a lot of difference along those lines. So I think that's a great point. And, maybe the traditional approach to threat intelligence is kind of becoming less prevalent or important, I guess, for lack of a better description.
You have such a unique environment where students are a bit of an ephemeral population, right? Aren't they? Not every day, but every couple of years or so, you have new people coming in and out. Um, the students are also, it's also a culture of like learning and experimentation, and so you want your students to play around with new technologies and try out all the new AI tools. And so, I'd love if you could talk a little bit about kind of how do you balance just like that culture of innovation for students with kind of also making sure you're secure?
From a strategic perspective, my CIO and the organization as a whole has made a very conscious choice about, hey, we are going to support this AI journey for our student population in multiple ways. And so the use of third-party tools. And so our students and have access to a lot of these tools and technologies. And we want to encourage them to do that. But they're going to do so in a way where it's segmented from, the more sensitive information and data that we have. And we have our own, walled garden environment for those sort of use cases, right? But we have plenty of students that are doing research and the hundreds of labs and environments that we have here at Arizona State University. And so there's a time and place with regards to what technologies used for what purposes along those lines. So that's more of a kind of a traditional approach with regards to that. But in terms of encouraging and um, our students and doing outreach with faculty, one of the great things about our Create AI platform is it's no code. And so we literally have hundreds, if not over 1,000, different projects that faculty and staff have created on our Create AI platform. And so even my own team, from an operational perspective, my team has deployed these technologies and created their own bots. And so a good example of this is we just released, I'd say about a month or two ago, either updated or net new security standards, a total of 19. And so instead of just sharing that out, which we did throughout the community, we also created a bot that was trained on those and existing policies, such that if anybody had a question about what encryption, did we support, or what's our position about multi-factor authentication, or anything that would have been covered based off one of those standards, they could just inquire with our bot. And so that was accomplished through the use of our internally developed platform. And so in a lot of instances, we've had that level of engagement. And so just to add to that, we have even held like internal kind of small grant opportunities where people who are interested in leveraging our technology, they would apply for a grant and they would get all the tools and access they needed in order to create their own solutions. So for all academic units across the board. And so that's yet another way that we've engaged our large community to adopt and embrace the use of AI. And then with our students, an example of that is we're going to kick off, we're calling it our cyber hackathon, if you will, that has 3 different tracks. And so we're engaging our student populations on doing something along the lines of responding to a security incident. Another track is IoT hardware security, and the third track is social engineering with the use of AI. And so we're actively engaging our students and saying, hey, this is the place to learn, to play, and and basically develop the skills needed to be a successful cybersecurity practitioner in the future. So those are just a handful of examples of all the great innovative things that ASU is doing along those lines.
Lester, one of the things we like to do in the last kind of like 5 minutes or so is do a quick lightning round where we ask you questions that are unreasonable to answer in the one tweet format, but we're looking for the one tweet version. So, don't hold it against me and Mike, but we'll give you a couple right now. So I think we got 4. So Mike, why don't you go first?
Yeah, what's the one piece of advice you would give someone stepping into their very first CISO job? Maybe something they would overestimate or underestimate about the role?
I would say you cannot over communicate and understand what the business needs are of the organization and where cyber fits into that.
What is the best way for CISOs to stay up to date, to understand the latest technologies that are coming out and the implications for cybersecurity?
So the two approaches that I've taken over my career is one, staying plugged into the community as a whole. So here in the state of Arizona, the cybersecurity community is very close knit and it bridges sectors. So that's one. And then the other one, which is maybe not the normal course, I've continued to be involved in education. So from a faculty perspective, and because I'm not the most disciplined person in the world, if I'm being honest. And so having to teach something forces me to stay somewhat relevant and on top of technology. So I put myself in that position where I'm forced to stay on top of things and also take jobs like being the CISO at the largest public university in the country forces me to bone up and step up my game, especially around things like AI.
On the more personal side, what's a book you've read that's had a big impact on you and why?
So, Mike, I'm going to come clean with you. I'm probably one of the least well-read, especially when it comes to management type of books. I'm kind of old school, like, you just nose to grindstone sort of thing. But I will say one of the few books that I've read that really sticks out is, I don't remember the author's name, but it's Your Ship. And so it's a gentleman who was a U.S. Navy captain who very pragmatic book about what leadership means. And I've really taken that to heart and I've tried to emulate that a lot. And so really has nothing to do with technology per se, but everything to do about what leadership looks like within an organization.
Okay, last question, but also my favorite question to ask guests. What do you think will be true about the future of AI's impact on cybersecurity that most people consider to be science fiction?
Well, that is a great question. And so I'll just go with the first thing.
Contrarian take,
Yeah, well, I'll go with the first thing that comes to mind, which I hope doesn't come to fruition. And I've never seen the movie, but unless this country does something at a federal level around data privacy, my bigger concern is something, and again, I haven't seen the movie, something like Minority Report. And so, like Mike, when we were talking about, behavior, intent, et cetera, that's my fear is if we are able to collect enough data and AI being a logical source, because, who knows what is being done with the data that we're sharing, freely with all these commercial entities. How is that going to be leveraged? Is it going to be leveraged for good from a cybersecurity perspective, or is that going to be something a little bit more nefarious?
By the way, that's one of my favorite authors of Philip K. Dick. This is one of his short stories called The Minority Report. The whole book is about the kind of moral and ethical tensions, right, in that question. Obviously, it goes way beyond even crime, but like the nature of what is the future. So anyway, great. If you haven't read, so I think it's only like 40 pages, but if you read The Future, really thought-provoking story. But yeah, hopefully we'll. I think I'm an optimist that we're going to use all this awesome AI technology for good, and hopefully we'll put a lot of bad guys out of work though. So that'll be our collective goal here. Well, Lester, thank you so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Frankly, I barely got through half our scripted questions, just because I was so interested in what you were saying. So sorry if we were a little bit off the place, but really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was Lester Godsey, Chief Information Security Officer at Arizona State University. I'm Mike Britton, the CIO of Abnormal AI.
And I'm Evan Reiser, the founder and CEO of Abnormal AI. Thanks for listening to Enterprise AI Defenders. Please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Learn more about how AI is transforming cybersecurity at enterprisesoftware.blog. This show is produced by Josh Muir. See you next time.